Do you remember watching Bewitched when you were younger? It was a one-of-a-kind show about a witch attempting to fit into normal American suburban life. The show aired 254 episodes over 8 seasons. However, everything came to a sudden end with the final episode. So, what was the point of this final episode? What was the scene that convinced the studio that Bewitched had to end? And, while we're on the subject of endings, how did Bewitched get its start? On September 17, 1964, Bewitched was first shown on television. Darren and Samantha Stephens were introduced to us. Darren Stephens, originally played by Dick York and then by Dick Sargent, is the stereotypical suburban American husband that viewers had grown accustomed to seeing. But it was Samantha Stephens, who wasn't your standard suburban American housewife, who made the show stand out. She was a witch who had to keep her magical abilities hidden from everyone else. This unique storyline for the show had been attempted previously. Sol Sachs, the show's creator, was inspired by a variety of sources. He was influenced by the films I Married a Witch and Belle, Book, and Kendall. These works featured seemingly regular people who have supernatural and magical abilities. The contrast between real life and the magical world was clearly amusing to the audiences in Bewitched. Behind the scenes. When Bewitched originally aired on television in 1964, it was a huge success. There wasn't a single person in the audience who didn't fall for Samantha's charm. Elizabeth Montgomery's portrayal of the mischievous little witch was wonderful. The actors in this program seemed to have the best luck in the world, but no one knew the whole story behind the scenes that led to their demise. Until now. Not all as it seems. It's difficult to envision a group with such on-screen success and chemistry being anything less than close friends behind the camera. Unfortunately, that was not the case for the Bewitched cast. Indeed, the creators of this show had to overcome various challenges during the early days of filming that set the tone for what was to follow. Actress change. It's tough to imagine anyone else twitching their nose as cutely as Elizabeth Montgomery. Yet, the show's creators wanted someone else totally to play their leading woman. Tammy Grimes turned down the part due to the character's lack of ambition. She felt like if the character had all this power, why doesn't she cure all the world's ills? Writer Herbie J. Pilato explained in an interview she's not entirely wrong. Hidden pregnancy. Elizabeth Montgomery was pregnant 3 times while filming the show, but only 2 of her pregnancies were acknowledged and incorporated into the screenplay as Tabitha and Adam's supernatural deliveries. Her first pregnancy was challenging for her because she had to hide it. The producers refused to include it in the plot because they thought it was unseemly for her to get pregnant so soon after marrying Darren. That didn't sit well with her. Hesitation. After Tammy Grimes declined the starring role, the casting directors chose Elizabeth Montgomery. She almost didn't take the job since she planned to retire from acting before Bewitched began filming. She was eventually persuaded otherwise, although no one knew why she was considering leaving before taping the show. Failure of an episode. Bewitched had many remarkable episodes, but one of the most famous is now seen in a totally different light. The episode Sisters at Heart, which discussed minorities and racism, aired in 1970. The ideas were fine, but the execution fell short and would be considered unacceptable today. However, this was not the episode that resulted in their cancellation. No sick leave. Despite having a 105-degree fever, an episode of the show was shot with Dick York during the 5th season. Despite his fever, the producers allowed him to work. So it's no surprise that he had a seizure while sitting on set under the flickering lights, which he recovered from. However, he resigned strangely, and then something strange occurred. Sly tactics. Dick Sargent took over for Dick York after he mysteriously vanished from the show. This time, the producers felt as if they had finally had their fantasy, Darren. They were also determined to make the transfer as smooth as possible and to ensure that fans preferred the new Darren. As a result, the producers reran every episode in which Dick York did not appear before he came on screen. How cunning. Awkward relationships. While audiences rapidly warmed to Dick Sargent, Agnes Moorehead, who played Samantha's mother, in Dora, didn't like the new actor. This split caused some unpleasant moments in production. About the 3rd or 4th show I was in, Moorehead said to people in front of me, they should never meddle with success. Dick Sargent once said, ouch, but that wasn't the only shaky relationship. Off-screen life. Off-screen, Elizabeth Montgomery's life was also full of upheaval. Her marriage to Bill Asher was strained due to Asher's betrayal. In reaction, the Bewitched star may have had her own affairs with Richard Michaels, one of the show's other producers. From here, it was all downhill. Triangle of love. Montgomery married the show's producer after her romance with Asher ended. It's no surprise that Montgomery had a slew of fans, including her co-stars. York was one of her co-stars who allegedly fell in love with her. However, it was an unrequited love that made the stage feel even more awkward. Relationships are tense. Montgomery and her on-screen mother, Moorhead, did not appear to agree, adding to the difficult times on set. On one occasion, Montgomery was claimed to have made a snarky remark about Moorhead's unpleasant behavior on set, to which Moorhead responded with a disdainful sneer, "Don't look at me that way." Montgomery responded, but this wasn't the only issue on set. Party on set. Going to work in the 1960s was a lot different than it is today. For starters, you weren't required to wear a suit or a dress every day, and you may also drink during the workday. It was no different for the Bewitched actors, who drank real liquor while their characters drank. Yikes! You'd want to get the take as soon as possible before the alcohol kicks in. Misunderstanding. One of the most intriguing aspects of the show was that Samantha's famed nose wiggle, which she used to trigger her magic, was really misunderstood. She wasn't wriggling her nose, but rather her top lip. It was defined as the character's anxious twitch by director William Asher. But, in the end, what caused the show's cancellation? Perfect time. As you may have predicted, the program ended due to the conflicts in the cast relationships behind the scenes. It remained as popular as ever when it was cancelled. However, some may argue that they stopped while they were on top, so perhaps it was all for the best. While people seemed to enjoy Bewitched to the end, it appeared that it could not compete with other excellent sitcoms of the period. The numbers were low towards the conclusion of the 6th season, and it was evident that the show couldn't carry on, in this case. However, the studio agreed to let the show go for another 2 seasons. The show had to finish somewhere, and in such cases, the creator of the show should come up with an enticing series conclusion. Unfortunately, Bewitched was not one of them. Elizabeth Montgomery, too, had grown bored of playing the part and desired to move on. At the same time, it was unusual for creators to know if their series would be renewed for another season back then. As a result, the show didn't need to conclude definitively. A typical episode with a typical story would serve. So, what was the scene that caused Bewitched to be cancelled? Rather than a single scene, it is the understanding that the final episode is a blatant remake of an earlier episode. Endora gives Darren a pin in the last episode. The truth, nothing but the truth, so help me Sam. That forces him to always tell the truth. It was a remake of an episode called Speak the Truth that aired in 1965. After 7 years, it appeared like the studio thought that viewers had forgotten about the prior episode and would not notice the obvious reworking of an old tale. The plot is meant to reveal whether Daring was actually committed to Samantha. It was obvious that he was because the show lasted 8 seasons and over 250 episodes. One of the most significant aspects of this final episode was the appearance of Sarah Seeger, who had previously appeared on the show. However, this was not the episode that fans had hoped to see. By this point, the show had lost its original allure, and its final episode fell short of the caliber of other episodes from earlier seasons. As a result, it wasn't a single scene, but a whole show that caused Bewitched to be cancelled. But with the show's consistently dismal ratings, it was evident that its time had come. One could yearn for things to be different. However, the show had a successful run and is still affectionately remembered today. Join Factsverse to learn more about what happened to Bewitched's final episode. Bewitched no longer. While she is most known for her role as Samantha Stevens in Bewitched, Elizabeth Montgomery had a love-hate relationship with acting. She became very careful with her choice of projects after her part on Bewitched, and she never wanted to commit to such a long TV series again. Elizabeth spent the rest of her career primarily acting in TV movies. In addition to acting, Elizabeth Montgomery was a successful businesswoman. She owned 20% of Bewitched and received royalties from the show for the rest of her life. This financial security allowed her to be more selective in her roles. She apparently didn't always enjoy working with Dick York, who was in love with her, but she didn't share their on-screen feelings. She had planned to leave the show after the 5th season, but it was the promise of more money that kept her around for the following seasons, and she put up with a show she had grown tired of. Perhaps the lack of passion on site from the cast and staff members contributed to the show's decline in popularity. Elizabeth Montgomery's wedding. Elizabeth Montgomery was married to Bill Asher, the show's producer. Given Bewitched's financial success, it was logical that he wanted the show to continue for as long as possible. Fortunately, the show went on to become one of the most popular sitcoms of all time. In reality, it was the longest-running sitcom of its period in terms of fantasy sitcoms. While Dick Sargent adored the part and was delighted to succeed Dick York, it appeared that by the mid-1970s, both the creators and the audience had lost their enchantment. The Bewitched legacy. Despite its popularity declining after the 5th and 6th seasons, Bewitched remained popular until the very end. The show was abruptly cancelled, but one wonders if a 9th season would have been successful. Despite this, it is still one of the most popular American sitcoms of all time. While the new casting of Dick Sargent resulted in a significant decline in ratings, there were plenty of fans who appreciated the change, and the show continued. Agnes Moorehead, who played Endora, was displeased with the shift because she had enjoyed working with Dick York. Nonetheless, this did not detract from the show's excellence until the very end, and it continues to receive regular viewing. The show entered the American lexicon. Gladys Kravitz, for example, had such an impact that the name Gladys Kravitz became a euphemism for someone who doesn't mind their own business. This happened despite the fact that Gladys Kravitz was a minor figure. It was one of the first television programs to switch from black and white to color. The switch happened in Season 2, Episode 38. The show was nominated for 3 Primetime Emmys and won 3 of them. In 1966, Bill Asher received an Emmy for directing the show. Alice Pierce won an award for Best Actress in a Supporting Role the same year. Marion Lorne was nominated for Best Actress in a Supporting Role for her performance as Aunt Clara in 1968. The show is frequently listed as one of America's all-time favorite sitcoms. It is still a great show that older generations enjoy and that new generations are discovering. While he eventually left the show, Darren Stephens remains one of Dick York's most well-known characters, and some of us will always be enchanted by Elizabeth Montgomery's portrayal of Samantha Stephens. That brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell if you are new to this channel to be notified when we upload more content.